liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. We made it to Friday. Friday, April 28th, 2023, to be specific, in case you were wondering which Friday exactly it was. All right, and we're sorting through the news stories happening this morning. And, I got off track here. See whether I can take care of retweeting, as they say, a gun fail story from new gun fail standby SFDB. Just, routine. One of those things that happens from time to time, as they point out in their own feed about this, using their own tagline of "It happens." But I guess Washington State target shooter out hanging out, deciding to use his own property to exercise his own Second Amendment rights, and then, of course, help the neighbor exercise their Second Amendment rights to be shot in the face by surprise while working in the orchard. So, that sort of thing happens every once in a while because, people don't follow the rules. And they helpfully, the sheriff's office from the area helpfully reminds everybody and provides content for the local newspaper by reminding everyone of the safety rules, the 4 basic safety rules. Always, of course, treat the guns as if they're loaded. That's what he was out there doing. Target shooting. Don't put your finger on the trigger until your sights are on your target, whether that's the orchard worker's face or the target you're actually shooting at. Know what is between you and your target and what is beyond the target. Yes. And that's the one that's the problem here. Have a backstop that can stop the bullet, because there's most people have around the house all sorts of things that can stop bullets. And you just put it up as a backstop and everything will be fine. You'll never miss the target. You'll never miss the backstop too. So, you know how these things go. And keep firearms pointed away from anything that you don't want to destroy. I like the way they phrased that one. That's always fun and interesting. And, wow. All right. Just another day out there on the gun fail front. Basically, literally nothing extraordinary about that, except, of course, for the person who got shot in the face. It seems like an extraordinary thing for that person. But sometimes when people get shot in the face, they apologize for being shot in the face. That does happen too. Of course, that happened to Dick Cheney and the guy he was hanging out with, whose name I forget, and who I think fairly recently died as well. And we made note of that on the program. All right, there's definitely some other things, though, that I had to share with you. I know there was things, that's as newsworthy as it gets for the guy who got shot in the face. And maybe it's a sensitive soul that shot him in the face. I really don't know. They don't tell you anything about that in the article. And they'll never go and bother and find out either. But whatever. All right, let's see. Lots of things to catch up with, and maybe some good digging in the archives of Pocket to bring you some stories that have been sitting around for a while. Might even be able to make a theme out of them, provided we get started at some point, like right now. Let's see. Oh, by the way, Matthew Rigdon has chimed in again, thinking more. He seems to be thinking an awful lot about Tucker Carlson's firing, which is difficult not to do. It was very exciting to find out that Tucker Carlson was fired. But asking yesterday, and of course I'm only getting around to seeing it now. You mentioned, that's me, I mentioned the Friday night Tucker, quote, firing. So I guess he's got some doubts about that. And how they picked that night to bury the news. That's a frequent possibility. People do things like that on Fridays, on weekends, to bury the news. Sometimes there's some other reasons too. If anything, what we've kind of learned about the Tucker Carlson firing is that there were like 15 different reasonably good reasons to fire him, 20 different people who wanted to fire him, 30 different ways to do it. So, it sort of came together in as amalgam. I think it was more about just people deciding, I've had enough with this guy. But both. There's this additional thing, which Matthew brings up, which did occur to me, and so therefore I want to acknowledge that it confirms my priors. And so therefore I will read to you Matthew's suggestion. I wonder, and this is Matthew wondering, if executives in the C-suites at CNN and Fox are friends or drinking buddies, and each knew that the other was looking at dumping one of their big-name hosts, Tucker Carlson at Fox and Don Lemon at CNN. We haven't discussed the fact that Don Lemon was also fired. I think we mentioned it, but not really discussed the firing, and that's because that one I don't know how to unpack. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Tucker Carlson, but there's about 15 times the volume of writing about Tucker Carlson that we can share as there has been about Don Lemon, and maybe that's a problem all by itself. But anyway, each knew that the other was looking at dumping Carlson or Lemon, as the case may be, and both thought, hey, I can drop him and the other media will be more obsessed about their guy and his firing. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a reasonable possibility that, I don't know which came first, but it might be that, my guess would be that CNN thought, well, now we can sort of get away in a quiet space with the Don Lemon firing, because everybody who will care about Don Lemon's firing will be more interested in Tucker Carlson's firing, and point at that first. I didn't, I wouldn't discount that at all. But now what do we do? Now we've said it, and I say, yeah, right, probably. And, we have to sit around saying that sounds like a pretty good idea. And we don't have anybody who writes for a newspaper or a magazine saying that it's a good idea. So therefore, we're just a bunch of schmucks, and we sit around and say, that's a conspiracy theory now until somebody writes it for a newspaper or magazine. It could be just as conspiratorial and just as baseless. But once we read it from there, well, you know how this media game works. Okay. So let's see. Many other things to share, as I mentioned, and here's some of them in pocket. Here's something I wasn't prepared for. We told you the story yesterday, or we reminded you of the story yesterday of the transgender legislator in Montana, whose name I had to be reminded of, and now I remember that her first name is Zooey and her last name is Zephyr. Yes, Zooey Zephyr. It does sound like it's maybe not entirely real, but people have been named weirder things. Anyway, that was a rather incredible story, and I guess it's gone further, and I don't have the latest news on exactly what's gone on and whether they're disciplining her further or even looking to actually expel her from the body. But I did see this interesting twist on the story. We noted along the way that the governor of Montana is Greg Gianforte, and he shouldn't have anything to do with the expulsion or discipline, I don't think. But for some reason, his name came up in the story. I don't remember the exact detail, but he's probably, posturing as anti-trans in some way. And that's how he got himself in the story. But here's a twist I didn't know. Gianforte's son is apparently one of many lobbying the governor against the anti-trans bills. That must have been it. Gianforte probably promising to sign anti-trans bills if they were sent to him. And, I wasn't expecting to hear about his family lobbying him against signing one of these bills. And guess what? The reason apparently is that David Gianforte has told his father, according to the subheader here, that the bills will harm the LGBTQ plus community. Yes, that is true. That he's a part of. Oh, okay. Well, that's a new twist. Very often, Republican legislators come to see the light in one way or another when members of their family, particularly their own children, come out to them as being a member for one reason or another, would claim a letter, essentially, or many, for that matter, in the LGBTQ plus rainbow, as it were. And I guess, on the other hand, others are giant a-holes and decide that they will ignore it, or even worse, I guess, take the Gimmitarian approach, which is, my son, daughter, non-binary offspring or relative, is fine. And I'm okay with that, and they should have rights, but everybody else is a jerk and shouldn't have rights. I'm just kind of curious where this comes down, but it's an interesting story all by itself. Mara Silvers reports this story for the Montana Free Press, and, well, here we go. In late March, David Gianforte made an appointment to talk about 3 bills with Montana's Republican governor, Greg Gianforte, who happens to be his father. David, who's 32, sat down in the governor's office on March 27th with a prepared statement about legislation affecting transgender Montanans and the LGBTQ plus community generally, to which David says he belongs. And I'm inclined to believe him at that point. He wanted to talk about Senate Bill 99, a ban on gender-affirming health care for minors. Senate Bill 458, a bill to define sex as strictly binary in Montana Code. We did mention that one. And House Bill 359, a ban on drag performances in many public spaces. Jumping on the bandwagon with that one. Sitting across from his father in the governor's office with Gianforte's top health advisor present, David said, he read his printed statement out loud. And, it was a very informal printed statement. It's here, I guess this is the quote. "Hey, Dad." It's a great way to start. "Thanks for setting aside time to meet with me. It means a lot to me," David said. "There are a lot of important issues passing through the legislature right now. For my own sake, I've chosen to focus primarily on transgender rights, as that would significantly directly affect a number of my friends. I would like to make the argument that these bills are immoral, unjust, and frankly, a violation of human rights." Awesome. David, who identifies as non-binary and uses he and they pronouns, he and they, is the governor's second oldest of 4 children. In an April 25th interview, he said he didn't know what kind of impact lobbying his father, the governor, might have. But David said they felt strongly. That's, I'm not used to the they. I'm not used to a lot of things. Okay. But David said they felt strongly about using their connection and access to one of the state's most powerful elected officials to bring more light to issues impacting LGBTQ plus Montanans. He said why did they switch? I don't know. He said he initially reached out to his father over email asking him, as your constituent and your son, to veto the legislation advancing toward his desk. It is a long shot, but why not ask, right? I'm glad he felt up to the task. I felt somewhat of an obligation to speak with him about it. Otherwise, I would regret the missed opportunity, David said. And I think we can all understand that feeling, something we all share in common here. The elder Gianforte responded hours later, according to an email exchange David provided to the Montana Free Press, thanking David for writing about an issue that was important to him. That's probably pretty standard. "I would like to better understand your thoughts and concerns. When can we get together to talk about it?" the governor wrote, signing the email, "Love, Dad." Good. David Gianforte, a Bozeman resident with a background in computer science, hasn't previously spoken publicly about his gender identity or his relationship with his father, who in 2021 became Montana's first Republican governor in 16 years. He said his family, including siblings who live in other states, doesn't typically discuss politics. I can get that. David said that after he first told his parents he was gay in 2020, the family never talked about it at length again. Probably also fairly typical, but okay. Throughout the current legislative session, David said he closely tracked the bills as they passed through the Republican-held chambers toward his father's desk. They said they weighed whether to broach the topic with their father and what might be risked in the process. Also a good question. "I do have a family relationship with my father, as many people do, right, that I'm trying to preserve," David said, adding that he didn't engage with his father on legislation during the 2021 session. "I felt that the best way to go about this would be to reach out to him in a more formal manner, and he was very willing to meet with me." The governor's office responded to a request for comment about David's characterization in a brief statement Tuesday night. "The governor loves his family." They were willing to say that much. and values their thoughts, ideas, and perspectives. Our office will not discuss private conversations between the governor and members of his family, the press secretary said, Press Secretary Brooke Stroyke, I don't know, Stroyke. Throughout the session, much public and media attention has been focused on the bills David is concerned about. As of Friday, SB 99, the ban on gender-affirming health care for minors, is the first to land on the governor's desk and is awaiting his signature or veto. In addition to hours of testimony and lawmaker debates, a legislative tally updated Tuesday morning counted more than 1,500 phone calls and messages to lawmakers in support of Senate Bill 99 and more than 1,800 in opposition. Oh, there's more. So there you go. Roughly 1,300 people respectively registered their favor and disfavor for Senate Bill 458, which would define sex in state law. The drag show restriction, HB 359, has garnered comments from nearly 246 proponents and 608 opponents and prompted drag performers to gather at the state capitol in April for a highly visible demonstration and story hour. Apparently the story hour is the way to go here. Now, what's the date on this article? The 26th. So that's 2 days. It's been a while now, and I don't know what the current state of the first of the bills that was listed is. This article is 2 days old, and I guess we were still waiting to find out whether or not at that point, as of Friday, last Friday, a week ago, this bill had been on his desk and was awaiting signature or veto. Let's see what the news says about Montana SB 99 and see whether there's anything in the news that tells us whether there's been an outcome here. Nothing, none of the headlines jump out at me as pointing, yeah, they're all fairly old headlines. Oh, here's one day ago, and it's about this very story. So, I don't know. In the federal system, he has 10 days to decide whether or not to sign or veto. So, I guess he may still be inside of that bubble if they have an analogous 10-day window. But no report here. But it might just be news vacuum in Montana too. But anyway, let's continue with the story. The displays of emotion and tension the bills have caused in other parts of the State House haven't triggered many public reactions from the governor's wing on the second floor. Gianforte dodged questions at a March press conference about where he stands on SB 99. After being repeatedly pressed, Gianforte eventually told reporters that it is, quote, extremely important we take the input of constituents and hear from all sides. This is extraordinarily tolerant and normal language, actually. We don't know whether it's tolerant or not. It's hiding the ball. But it's doing so in very normal terms, which is interesting all by itself. Anyway, and he added that he had met with transgender Montanans and their families about the bills. So he's extending that courtesy to a lot of people. That's nice. He may screw them over in the end, but, you do it the normal way. I don't know. Considering where Gianforte came to our notice, punching and pummeling reporters along the way in his career, I guess I would have thought that he would have had less regard for normalcy in handling this situation. But maybe that, and that is alone, will end up being the concession that he makes to his son's concerns. Anyway, days before those remarks, David was one of the people urging the governor to veto the bill. In emails and in conversation during their meeting, David said his father was thoughtful and stated a number of reasons for supporting the legislation. Even with their divergent perspectives, David said he left the office feeling like a weight was off his shoulders. That may be the best thing you can get out of Greg Gianforte in this situation. So, I'll take it. Weeks later, David said his mood shifted. The governor sent SB 99 back, here we go, to the legislature with amendments that, in David's view, did not make the legislation better for the state's LGBTQ plus community. Oh dear. The changes included revised definitions of sex to account for children with intersex conditions, Gianforte said, and tightened prohibitions on the use of public funds for minors' gender-affirming medical treatments. David said They had asked their father to think about transgender Montanans with empathy and compassion. Well, that's a problem for him, probably. Even if the governor didn't share their experiences. In his letter to lawmakers explaining the amendments, Gianforte referenced those same values, empathy and compassion, while also expressing support for the bill. To David, the letter didn't make sense. It was gimitarian in nature, and David, a normal person, did not understand it. It's bizarre to me to read the press release that my father put out, David said. He talks about compassion toward children, the youth of Montana, while simultaneously taking health care away from the youth in Montana. It's basically a contradiction in my mind. Yeah, mine too. David said he knows transgender people who have benefited from the medical services SB 99 would restrict, such as hormone therapy, including some who started taking those medications as teenagers. The other bills, he said, amount to invasions of privacy and attempts to curb the right of self-expression. And, of course, we know how they feel about freedom in Montana, except if you're not them. In committee hearings and floor debates, supporters of SB 99, the bill banning gender-affirming health care for minors, have focused on the government's obligation to protect minors from making consequential medical choices before they turn 18. Backers of SB 458, which would define sex, and that's in quotes, in state code, have placed a high value on defining sex as exclusively male or female based on reproductive characteristics. Some lawmakers who have spoken in favor of the bill banning drag performances in certain spaces have cast such shows as inherently sexual and inappropriate for minors. All three bills have largely passed along party lines, with Republicans supporting legislation, Democrats opposing. SB 458 awaits a final vote in the Senate, at least as of 2 days ago, before it can head to Gianforte's desk. HB 359 is scheduled for further deliberation by lawmakers from both chambers in a conference committee. Having grown up in a devout Christian household, raised on values his parents continue to publicly endorse, David said he attributes some Republican legislative support for the bills to lawmakers' strongly held beliefs about how God created humans. He also said he sees the political party system as unaccommodating to diverse perspectives. That's true. Our political system is binary. So I guess it's not hard to imagine that it would lend itself to trying to impose a binary nature on everything else as well. Yeah, he also said he sees the political party system as unaccommodating, right, to diverse perspectives, and thinks that pressure to conform might be a factor influencing his father, too. He's concerned about his career. He has particular issues that he focuses on, such as jobs and the economy, and he's aware that being able to stay in the position of governor is dependent on him staying in favor of the Republican Party. In the favor, it should be, I think. And I believe that affects his decisions on some of these bills. Probably true. He's got that right, I think. In recent days, David began publicly sharing their political sentiments. On Twitter last week, they shared a post from, Representative Zoe Zephyr, Democrat of Missoula, who we were mentioning earlier. This, of course, the transgender lawmaker whose attempts to speak on the House floor have been continuously refused by the Republican leadership because of comments she made criticizing Gianforte's changes to SB 99. Okay, that's an interesting wrinkle. And any lawmaker who supported the amended bill. David also shared their own perspective. I stand in support of, and that he's using, I guess he's speaking on Twitter and using the Twitter handle for Zoe Zephyr, which is Zoe and Behold, like lo and behold, but Zoe, but just Z-O. That's the nickname, Zoe. I stand in support of Zoe and Behold and the entire LGBTQ community. Oh, there's a plus in there. LGBTQ plus community of Montana, which includes myself and many of my friends. David wrote, I have worked to oppose bills in the current Montana legislative session, including SB 99 and SB 458. A lot of the number repetition in this piece. David said he doesn't expect that his public remarks or his conversation with his father will change the outcome of any bill, but David said he doesn't want to take part in sweeping issues under the rug. Only by speaking candidly and openly can people move forward, he said, in their own families or in the public sphere. I feel like I have a voice and I can be heard, and I feel, not only in communicating with my father, that's not necessarily the main point, but also just showing support for the transgender community in Montana, David said. I think that could be meaningful, especially at this time. Okay. Interesting perspective, and you got an interesting look at the dynamics between him and his dad a little bit. I mean, superficially, but it's something more than we had before. And I don't know, I expected Greg Gianforte to be more belligerent and outspoken and angry about these things, and it's nice that he's not creating additional familial tension and all this, but that may be the only thing we get to take away from it. All right, well, interesting. Something I did not know before. Now we can switch states, except we're almost out of time to do so. But I'll hint to you that we're going to switch states, and I'll tell you where we're going to switch to, and then you have 2 minutes to see if you can guess what story I'm going to switch to. And we're going to switch to Nebraska and pick up on a related theme there. Is there anything that we can cram into the minute or so we have before we actually depart for the break? Well, we can say this anyway, to no one's surprise. An observation made on Mastodon by one Celeste Pewter, who, in responding to the news report that the Senate has just recently voted, the U.S. Senate, to overturn Biden's truck pollution limits, and I'm not certain of the procedural posture where we are here, but I guess some truck pollution limitations put in place, and the Senate has voted to do away with them. A reminder, if you need proof that Dianne Feinstein's absence matters, look at today's vote. It was probably yesterday. The vote was 50-49 because, of course, Manchin voted with the GOP and Feinstein is still out. Had Feinstein been there, it would have been a 50-50 tie with Harris as the tiebreaker.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, okay. So continuing with the, so you know what, before I move over to Montana, I thought I would take a look at exactly what Celeste is talking about here. But she goes on to make a additional point. Yes, Biden is expected to veto this whole thing, but this is only one example, she says, of how one person's absence can impact the Senate when there are such narrow margins. I'm not someone to push someone off their job, but I'm also worried, especially given the bad 2024 map for Senate Dems. Now, she says, is the time to shore up as much as possible, and we can't do that if we're missing a key vote. And I think that's probably true. By the way, so the story I was, or she was referencing is one from The Hill about what's going on with the pollution limit. If you want to know what's in the background in that, and I imagine you probably do, and there are a couple of comments we can make along the way, so why not? The Hill story here by Rachel Frazin, Frazin, from the 26th, just 2 days ago. Senate votes to overturn Biden truck pollution limit. What pollution limit was that? Well, I don't know. We'll ask whether Rachel can explain it to us. The Senate on Wednesday passed a Republican-led effort to undo a Biden administration rule that aims to cut pollution from heavy-duty trucks. So an administrative action, I imagine, taken without congressional action. Probably then going to end up in a lawsuit at some point saying it's an unconstitutional. And who knows, maybe it was. But first, they did take action to disapprove of it. The vote was 50-49. Joe Manchin, of course, voted with Republicans to get rid of the rule. Dianne Feinstein, who's been absent from the Senate amid health issues, did not vote. The rule in question aims to cut down on emissions of pollutants called nitrogen oxides that can harm the respiratory system and are also components of acid rain. The EPA says, it's interesting how this gets glossed over. I mean, it's right here in black and white, but watch what happens. The EPA says it will prevent as many as 2,900 premature deaths and 18,000 fewer cases of childhood asthma annually by 2045. So I don't know whether that means 2,900 premature deaths annually as well, or is it just a one-time thing? But it sounds like it's an annual number. I mean, going forward, I assume it's banned forever as opposed to just for a year or so. Republicans, however, there's going to be a counterpoint. But what's the Republican counterpoint? And it's interesting that it's presented this way, and we're supposed to say, well, we report, you decide. So, like, again, on the one hand, 2,900 people die prematurely from this stuff every year. 18,000 children develop asthma because of this stuff. Republicans say, though, it is overly burdensome for the trucking industry and could worsen inflation. How so? Of course, additional inflationary burdens on the trucking industry. That's not an inflationary burden, by the way. That's just a cost of doing business. It's a misappropriation of the terminology. So economists everywhere are tearing their hair out. It's not an inflationary burden per se, but it is a regulatory burden, and it can be inflationary on prices, but it's not a result of inflation. Additional inflationary burdens on the trucking industry will mean that any product transported by trucks, whether it's food, clothing, or other commodities, each one of those products will cost more. Senator Deb Fischer of Nebraska, that wasn't our transition to Nebraska, but it helps now anyway. Now it'll make more sense. It won't. But anyway, she said this, of course, in a floor speech on Wednesday, according to a copy of her prepared remarks. Manchin announced ahead of the vote that he would join the Republicans in trying to undo the regulation. We'll get to that in a second. But just to pause for a second, it sounds so reasonable. It will be presented right alongside these other claims from the EPA, et cetera, et cetera. I was basically saying food and clothing could cost more. Well, that's true. It could happen. But food and clothing actually already does cost more and always cost more. There's always inflationary pressures on food and clothing, whether it's trucking industry costs or not. And the trucking industry, by the way, will have every incentive, as do the clothing and food industries, to just say that costs are rising so that they can charge more. We actually have been witnessing that happening we're in the middle of that right now. And economists here, too, are finally getting people to realize just because they raise prices because the market will bear it doesn't mean that they're inflationary in nature. There sometimes is just profit taking, and they're not passing on any additional costs. They're just taking a higher chunk of rent out of you because they can. And that's what's been happening. All these stories where we've been noting, inflation is, higher than, much higher than normal, 6, 7, 8% inflation. What are we going to do? P.S. record corporate profits across the board in every sector. If it's inflationary in nature, then corporate profits should be taking a hit as well. They're not. And that could mean one of two things. Either the nature of the price increases isn't actually inflationary after all, or the price increases are running at twice the rate of inflation so that they both offset inflation and contribute to record profits. Excuse me for getting all, economic on you, but I mean, we've kind of been noticing that happening for the past year plus, as we, see more and more newspaper complaints about inflationary pressures and what are they going to do about it. And then the inflation went away, but the corporate profit records didn't go away. So, another interesting indication. But again, the normalization of comparing, costs could go up. Yes, but what was that other thing you said a minute ago? I've already forgotten it. We've elided the point now. gone right. Oh, yeah, that's right. 2,900 people, 2,900 people a year will die prematurely because we're spewing this gas into their air and they're breathing it in. 18,000 kids will develop childhood asthma additionally each year as well. By the way, what about the inflationary pressures on asthma medication? We're now increasing demand vastly every year for childhood asthma medication. And naturally, that means that they'll want to increase production, produce at scale, and pass the savings on to consumers, right? No, I doubt that very much. What about the inflationary pressure on medical costs for these people who are battling terminal illness as a result of this pollution, and children developing childhood asthma and needing treatment for that? I don't understand why Deb Fischer hasn't figured that out. Why is she not talking to pharmaceutical industry reps about what's going to happen to the cost of the asthma medication, talking to families about the pressures of having to procure that and pay that extra? And what about insurance, where they'll be raising the co-pays that families have to pay in order to get that asthma medication? Or never mind what's happening to the budgets of the 2,900 who are dying prematurely from this each year. But it didn't get a mention. Not only not on the floor, but not, the Hill can say it. Nobody said it on the floor, so what the hell am I supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe nobody did say it on the floor. It's entirely possible. On the other hand, it's entirely possible that somebody did say it on the floor and they were like, that's so abstract, it doesn't make any sense. We'll just note the EPA's basic numbers. They already said that. The EPA already told us what was going to happen. And then there was this speech by Deb Fischer. So let's use that, and the two things can be balanced out. But Deb Fischer doesn't address the deaths. She addresses something completely different. It's weird that they throw those two things together. One side said one thing, one side said the other. But, it would be boring, and I assume obvious, but I don't know how many people stop to make this consideration that these two sides did not address one another's points at all. And I don't know. I just find that curious. And that's what makes it worth it to read the news together, I think, in the morning. Otherwise, I don't know. Anyway, so where were we here? Oh, yes, right. Manchin was complaining about the whole thing. The Biden administration wants to burden the trucking industry. No, they don't. They just want to, But the Biden administration is worried about 2,900 people who die each year and 18,000 children who develop asthma and have got to get medication, and their parents can't pay for it, and it gets in the way, and they can't play soccer, and they can't go outside, and they can't do the things that kids are supposed to be able to do because the trucking industry doesn't want prices to go up on it, even though it always, what did they just say? They just said that the prices would go up to consumers, right? So again, just economically speaking, why is this never the debate economically? What's the problem, right? Didn't you just say your costs were going to be covered by consumers in the end? Yes, you did, right? And that was the problem. That was the reason you can't pass this bill, because clothing prices will go up. If clothing prices go up, it's because shipping prices went up. If shipping prices went up, it's because we're paying shipping prices that are higher, right? So the trucking industry is now taking in more money for shipping these goods. What's wrong with that? What is the big problem? Why is everybody crying about truckers and not sick kids? I don't know. Family values, I guess. Republicans and Manchin are worried about that. My family values is my family is sick and my kids are dying, but the truckers are okay. And it's good to be pro-trucker and all that. Truckers got to make a living too, but they're making the living. They just said they were going to be making that living. People will be paying higher prices. I don't know why this goes on. And the answer is economics is boring and no one wants to talk about it. Anyway, the Biden administration wants to burden the trucking industry, what a thing to say, with oppressive regulations that will increase prices by thousands of dollars and push truckers and small trucking companies out of business. Why is it pushing that? How is it both pushing them out of business and costing families the extra money that it costs to keep trucking industry in business? Where is this money going to? It's disappearing. No wonder they can't balance any budgets. Anyway, where were we with this? When our country faces record high inflation, it's not record high, but okay, and vulnerable supply chains, we do have that. We cannot let the EPA continue to seize unrestrained power, come on, and create regulations that devastate our economy, and help people not die. Again, right, this is like the deathbed confessions of 2,900 people a year. At least the economy is okay. Come on. This is no different from when we were, in the middle of the pandemic. The economy. Kill your grandmother because economy. For people who are so concerned about the economy, it's just curious. Americans apparently innately interested in the economy after all. It turns out I thought the economy was boring, and that's why they weren't paying attention to the fact that the trucking industry was both getting paid plenty and making record profits like everybody else, and going out of business at the same time, as is everyone else. And just like it's the same fantastic deal, right? So this is interesting. The trucking industry is like every other industry, making record profits. Sure, there's inflationary pressures. There's also non-inflationary pressures on prices, but they're charging them and they're getting paid them. Meanwhile, the families are paying the charges and dying. This is a fantastic deal for them. And thank God Joe Manchin is stepping in to protect them from the tyranny of being able to live and having some more of the money that they earn in their pockets. We do not want that. It's important that truckers get that money, and they are getting that money. But it's also important that they be able to keep more of it by not having to pay for a more expensive kind of fuel. I don't know. Anyway, so for a bunch of people who are not interested enough about the economy to figure out that this money has to be going somewhere. It can't just be disappearing from everyone's pocket. Well, I don't care because economics is boring. Yes, but you're making all of your decisions based on it. Yeah, let's kill these people because remember, economy, as long as it's okay, I feel all right. Anyway, despite its passage, this stupid bill's passage, the resolution, which won't even do anything. I guess it's one of the, it must be like Congressional Review Act type resolution. A resolution of disapproval that could, in fact, have real consequences. Despite its passage, the resolution is not expected to ultimately prevail. The White House said Wednesday that President Biden would veto the effort, and it is unlikely to be able to win the 2/3 majority needed to override the veto. Heavy-duty vehicles and engines contribute to pollutants that threaten public health. Over time, the final rule will prevent hundreds of premature deaths, thousands of childhood asthma cases, and millions of lost school days every year. Remember that? Parents, you listen to the parents. The kids are missing school. Mask mandates are terrible. COVID, learning loss, etc. Well, these kids are missing school, and they're missing school because of respiratory issues. Right? You know what will be interesting? When they get around to saying, well, why should we impose these additional costs on the trucking industry? If kids have trouble breathing this stuff, let them wear masks. Suddenly they'll be pro-mask again. Oh, my God. Anyway, as the administration is saying here, the White House says, over time, the final rule will prevent hundreds of premature deaths, asthma cases, millions of lost school days every year for the tens of millions of Americans who live, work, and go to school near roadways. Is your school near a road by any chance? With high truck volume, including truck freight routes, the White House said on Wednesday. Okay, they meant a very specific kind of road. The vote, meanwhile, follows efforts to undo several other rules out of the Biden administration, including regulations related to water policy and retirement investing, apparently none of which are any concern to Dianne Feinstein. I'm sure she's very troubled by the whole thing, but not troubled enough to allow the largest populations, the most populous state in the union, to have two senators. Anyway, there's a lot wrapped up in that story that seems like a fairly simple and straightforward one, so I thought I would share it with you. Okay, now, I told you that there was another reason to talk about Montana. I knew it. Somewhere it exists. Where is it? Back in Pocket. Got to go back searching for the Montana connection. No, not the Montana, the Nebraska connection. We were going to switch over to Nebraska, right? And Deb Fisher got mentioned. That wasn't the reason we were switching to Nebraska. The reason was related more closely to the earlier story And we're going to play the Jeopardy wait around music, waiting for this site to load. It's LGBTQ Nation, which I think we used the other day for something else too. So welcome back to LGBTQNation.com, where Alex Bollinger is responsible for this segue over to Nebraska politics, where a Nebraska Democratic lawmaker, they have him, under investigation. Why? Because she has a trans child. Obvious, right? So now you have to have an investigation. Is it, it's child abuse to have a transgender child, and so therefore we're investigating you for that? It may develop into that. It is Nebraska after all. But no, not initially. What's happening here? And I should note at the outset that even some Republicans have come out in opposition to this investigation. Here's what's going on. Out Nebraska State Senator Megan Hunt, which I guess means this is, Megan Hunt is out as, LGBTQ plus in one way or another. But this is LGBTQ Nation. And so the lingo is, insidery. And so, it's an interesting, construction, but I think I get it. Out Nebraska State Senator Megan Hunt has been put under investigation by the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission. That's what they call it there. I guess their ethics office, or NADC. Why? For a possible conflict of interest. This is really extraordinary. And another one of these, where Republicans are stretching the boundaries of the definitions of words. And then, of course, accusing everybody else of Orwellian newspeak, because, of course, every Republican accusation is a confession. So what's happening here? Just as in, where were we earlier? Montana, right, where they were challenging the right of Zoe Zephyr to speak on the floor because she, quote, supported insurrection, because she raised a fist at people who were, in support of people who were protesting in the gallery. And that's now a riot because, of course, they had to clear the gallery with police who decided to come in riot gear. And so therefore it must be a riot. And they're now saying that's the equivalent of an insurrection, to protest in favor of something or against a bill that you don't like, and for a legislator to acknowledge you from the floor. Just as in Tennessee, they said that was insurrection as well. Now, check this out. She's been put under investigation, has Megan Hunt, because of a conflict of interest, which is usually something like if you are voting on a bill that would subsidize the, mining industry, is the sort of thing that they would tend to, subsidize, something dumb and extractive like that. And you own a mining company and you would benefit financially from it. That's the sort of conflict of interest that usually they're investigating. But get this, under investigation for a possible conflict of interest because she has a transgender child, and the state legislature is considering a bill to ban gender-affirming care for transgender youth. In other words, you're making laws about something that you have a personal interest in, but not a financial interest, just an interest because you're a person who has to live under Nebraska law. In other words, the normal state of affairs, which ordinarily would affect every legislator. We're going to make it illegal to park in this zone, and it's going to be a $50 fine if you park there. Do you own a car? Conflict of interest. You might benefit financially by remembering that you're not supposed to park there and not being fined $50. So there you go. Conflict of interest. I mean, it's just that dumb. Omaha lawyer David Begley filed the complaint, which was hand-delivered yesterday, I guess 2 days ago, by NACD Executive Director Frank Daly, who really maybe should have said, no, this is too dumb for me to be involved with, but instead decided to hand-deliver it. That's weird. The point isn't that I could gain financially if my kid has rights, she said. The point is harassment. I feel like there's something missing from that, in that jump, but there isn't. That's the way the story runs. Hunt is one of 3 state senators, and remember, it's a unicameral legislature in Nebraska. One of 3 state senators, along with Senators Michaela Cavanaugh, a Democrat, and Jen Day, also a Democrat, who have together been filibustering. Hey, everybody loves filibusters. Filibustering LB 574. I guess that's legislative bill 574, which would deny trans youth in the state access to reversible puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy, despite the fact that major medical organizations like the American Medical Association, heard of them maybe, American Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics all support age-appropriate gender-affirming care. But of course, usually the Republican bills are, well, we want to ban the kind of care that isn't age-appropriate but sounds bad. But also all the rest of the stuff too. The inappropriate stuff for earlier ages isn't happening, but neither are litter boxes in schools, and that doesn't stop us from screaming our heads off about that being the most important thing ever. Hunt, who is the first bisexual lawmaker in Nebraska, and by definition, therefore, by the way, just thought I'd point this out, the first bisexual legislator in a unicameral legislature. So lots of coming together in this one, a lot of unity. I'm feeling the love in this. Bisexual in a unicameral legislature, is the mother of a transgender 12-year-old son. Now, and that's the key point in all of this, that she also happens to be bisexual is actually beside the point, but in LGBTQ Nation, that's important to point out. Earlier this month, she got national attention when she spoke directly to the Republicans supporting LB 574. Don't say, this is an interesting, personal take on things too. I don't know if not everybody will agree with this one, but she's clearly taking this quite, personally, as she should, and feeling things very deeply. Here's the statement. Don't say hi to me in the hall. Don't ask me how my weekend was. Don't walk by my desk and ask me anything. I mean, anything? Really? Okay. Don't send me Christmas cards. Take me off the list. No one in the world holds a grudge like me. I don't know if that's great for legislators, but, in this case, she's on our side. She's going to fight. Fine. All right. Fine. No one in the world holds a grudge like me. I mean, by the way, I challenge you on that one. I hold them. But anyway, and no one in the world cares less about being petty than me. All right. You may have me there. I don't care. I don't like you. Hey. All right. It's fighting words and we like the fighting. But also, maybe you want to talk about that with somebody. We're here for you. Anyway, so how do you like that? No one in the world holds a grudge like me, and no one in the world cares less about being petty than me. This isn't being petty. This is being real. And, you're threatening the rights of my own rights, my child's rights. You're threatening their entire future. Thousands of people throughout the state. It's wrong. It's inhumane. And it's just terrible politics and policy all along. I don't have to be petty to oppose that. In fact, it's quite noble to oppose that. So I don't know. But anyway, look, she was in the moment. State law, though, requires that public officials and employees disclose potential conflicts of interest. But this refers to when a decision could have, quote, a financial benefit or detriment to the public official or public employee, a member of his or her immediate family or business with which he or she is associated. Begley, in his complaint, argued that Hunt would have, quote, a slightly more than average chance, and that's not really where we're supposed to be applying the law. It's supposed to be happening. But a slightly more than average chance of getting the state's Medicaid program to cover gender-affirming care for her son if LB, anytime I see an L and a B, LGBTQ, no, it's LB, legislative bill, 574 isn't passed. I've screwed that up and now we've lost the thread here, right? Check this out. The complaint is Megan Hunt would have a slightly more than average chance of getting state Medicaid support to cover gender-affirming care for her son if this bill isn't passed, even though Nebraska's Department of Health and Human Services bans already Medicaid funds from being used for gender-affirming care. So that's interesting. If the bill isn't passed, then Megan Hunt's son might get some gender-affirming care paid for by Medicaid if it wasn't for the fact that it's already the case that Nebraska's Department of Health and Human Services already bans Medicaid funds from being used. So LB 574 is redundant in that sense. But if it isn't passed, then the redundancy won't happen. It'll just be one layer of prohibition. And Megan Hunt's son won't get Medicaid-funded gender-affirming care, whether the bill is passed or not. But if the bill isn't passed, it won't be doubly prevented. And even if it was not prevented at all, and he qualified for Medicaid coverage for gender-affirming care, how is that a financial, it's a financial benefit, I guess, in a sense, to Megan Hunt, but it's a benefit that's available to any Nebraskan. That's the chief issue here. Well, not any Nebraskan. It has to be a Nebraskan who's got a transgender child. Well, yeah. But if Medicaid covers treatment for pediatric cancer, not everybody gets that money. You got to have a kid with pediatric cancer. I can go out and get cancer and get some of this money. Well, no, you're not. You're going to want to avoid problems that cost your family money. Anyway, so how do you like that? That's some stretch. In order to fully transition, Senator Hunt's child would need medical services, Begley wrote, and so therefore that's the conflict of interest. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And she says this before we head out for our next break. This, colleagues, is not serious. This is harassment. This is using the legal system that we have in our state to stop corruption, to increase transparency, to hold government accountable, and using it to harass a member of the legislature, who you all know is trying to do the right thing, is trying to parent her child in a way that keeps that child alive, like the asthma thing, but different, in a way that keeps that child successful in school and with friends and healthy. Both Republicans and Democratic lawmakers, thankfully, are, in fact, coming out and standing up for Hunt on this one. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow, well, I think we've done like 3 stories, and we're halfway through the show, and we're not even done with this one. I did mention to you, though, on our way out from the show and into the break, not out from the break, because that just happened, was that there were, in fact, some Republicans saying, yeah, this is actually kind of, where's Greg? We needed, oh, yeah.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening here. Thanks, Greg. Yes, I do not endorse this offensive complaint, State Senator Tom Brandt, a Republican, said, adding that family is off limits, and it is so far out of bounds that it does not merit discussion. That's really, that's essentially what the problem is. 1, targeting family, that's not great. And 2, that's just, you're not talking about the same sort of thing. You're stretching the definition beyond all recognition. And just like saying that if you protest against a certain bill that you oppose, that's a riot, that's insurrection. Just as bad is saying, well, this is a conflict of interest. You have a personal interest in seeing this bill passed, do you not? Yes, because I think all people should have rights. Well, I don't, but this bill will, if it doesn't pass, people might have rights. As it happens, they won't, because, or at least not that particular right, because that's already banned by the state health department. But that's a separate issue. Well, not separate, but a related issue, but not the same one. And, and then second of all, the idea that you're having rights is a conflict of interest. Well, you might enjoy those rights if these rights are passed. Therefore, it's a conflict of interest. This is basically the intellectual equivalent of these ideas like, I think everybody who's transgender should be banned from society in general. What? Shut up. You're an idiot. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. You can't go around banning people. Hey, you can't tell me that what I said is stupid. You're suppressing my right to express my opinion. That's a First Amendment violation. No, it's not. As between private citizens, anybody can tell anybody else to go stick it. That's, how do you not get that? Well, you're telling me I can't express my opinion. Well, then you're telling me I can't express my opinion, which is that you shouldn't express that opinion. Oh, well, they never get that far. It's too difficult for them to follow that logic. So, yeah, where we find people saying that if you tell me my idea is a bad one or that you disagree with it, that's a violation of my First Amendment rights, same sort of person who's likely to say, well, that's a conflict of interest. You want that thing. Therefore, if you vote for that thing, you're obviously corrupt. No, it doesn't work like that. Well, anyway, Tom Brandt, I guess. Tom Brandt's done. Now it's another senator, another Democrat. They found the other Democrat in Nebraska who says, so if Senator Hunt is going to get a conflict or a NADC file against her, then I should too, State Senator Wendy DeBoer said. Referring to how all legislators are impacted by legislation passed by the body, but it usually isn't considered a conflict of interest. What's happening? Are you throwing cassette tapes around? That's what it sounds like. What is that?
That's my mouse.
Hello, mouse. Mouse okay? All right. Well, it's the computer mouse. I'm always curious about what are these sounds I'm hearing in the background? Just like, I guess one of these days I need to ask Greg, why does it always sound like someone's tearing off sheets of tinfoil in the background while you're on the air? And the answer may be tearing off sheets of tinfoil. So I'm just curious about that one. All right. Anyway, everything's okay, everybody. But don't worry. Where were we on this one? All right. Yeah. So Senator Wendy DeBoer was saying basically what we were saying. Yeah. If this is going to result in an NADC file against this senator, then everybody should get one because all legislators are impacted by legislation passed by the body. But Hunt said that's not enough. She wants Republicans to give up their attempt to ban trans youth, like her son, from getting gender-affirming care. Well, she hopes to defeat the bill, sure. My colleagues stood up offering support, but I don't need their words. I need their vote, she said. I don't know how many friends she's winning with that one. Earlier this month, Hunt told LGBTQ Nation that the filibuster over LB 574 shows just how much Republicans want to harm transgender youth. The people who are standing in the way of progress for the session are not the folks like me standing up for human rights, Hunt said. It's on those who refuse to negotiate and compromise, who are saying it's more important to us to discriminate against kids than it is to have a successful session. It's on them. All right. And, right, that's true. And, of course, that relates back to an earlier made mention of the Nebraska unicameral legislator who first brought this all to our attention. That's, I think, Michaela Cavanaugh, earlier mentioned in the story as one of 3 Nebraska senators filibustering this bill. Michaela Cavanaugh, of course, continuing to filibuster all bills until this bill is dropped. I don't know whether or not Senator Hunt is participating in that generalized filibuster or not, but it sounds like she may be favorably inclined toward it. So there you have it. So we've gone back to Nebraska more in this past month than at any time in the entire history, I think, of the show. Okay, let's see. Other stuff to get to. Why not revisit Tucker Carlson? Because I think it's been a full week of Tucker Carlson coverage. Why not end with just a little bit more? The Vanity Fair piece that I mentioned yesterday, didn't get a chance to read it on the air, but I mentioned that you should all take a look at it because it's Gabriel Sherman and he does pretty good work, and it had an interesting angle. Now you will get that angle. Tucker Carlson's prayer talk may have led to Fox News ouster. And the quote at the end of this, that stuff freaks Rupert out. Let's see whether this helps add to our understanding of the firing situation. 24 hours after Fox News ousted its highest rated host, The network has yet to explain one of the most shocking defenestrations in cable news history. Interesting. Everyone loves the use of the word defenestration. That's a good one. And, all right, I'm not going beyond the release, a Fox News spokeswoman texted yesterday when I, Gabriel Sherman, me in the role of Gabriel right now, when I asked her for comment. In this information void, multiple theories about why Fox fired Carlson circulated in the media. It was fallout from the $787.5 million Dominion settlement. Remember how much the suit was originally for, right? $1.6 billion. Punishment for vulgar text messages published in Dominion court filings. Or could have been a consequence of former Fox producer Abby Grossberg's lawsuit, which alleged Carlson oversaw a hostile work environment. We should probably read through all the disgusting things that he did at some point, just so you think. I want you to come away with the impression that Tucker Carlson is a disgusting person, and you might not have that yet. What if you need more ammunition? You're probably there with me on that one. Fox News, by the way, it is noted here parenthetically, has vowed to, quote, vigorously defend the company against Grossberg's, quote, unmeritorious legal claims. We'll see. They said the same thing about the Dominion suit, and they lost. But none of these potential reasons fully add up. That's why everybody has their own theories, right? Fox News anchor Maria Bartiromo, right? I always get that wrong. Hyped Dominion conspiracies far more than Carlson did, yet she remains on the air. Barely, I guess. Fox had access to Carlson's texts and emails in the Dominion lawsuit for months, and it didn't punish him for it. Good point also. Fox hosts sued for sexual harassment in the past were fired publicly for cause, but Carlson wasn't. According to a source, Carlson wasn't even fired and remains on, how about this? According to a source, Carlson wasn't even fired and remains on the Fox News payroll. That's a possibility that we really haven't explored either. Like, okay, he's not on the air. Well, so there he is. The show's canceled. So therefore, it's a business, right? They paid him to do the show. He's not doing the show. They're not paying him anymore. I don't know that. You don't know that. And apparently a source says that's not even the case. He's just on, I guess, what amounts to paid administrative leave. What if they're paying him $35 million a year to do nothing? I got to get one of these jobs. And all you have to do is run around saying, crap for a couple years, maybe a decade or more, and have no shame. Oh, yeah. Have no shame about it. All right. Well, there's got to be an equivalent. Maybe for like $5 million a year, I could have shame about it. Or I could say worse or different things. I could say true things. I would say true things for $1 million a year. I would say true things for $100,000 a year. All right. Well, it's just not working out. Anyway, so the mystery remains. Why did Fox take its biggest star off the air? Okay, now we have to wonder. A new theory has emerged. I need some sort of, I don't have any, fantastic, revelation sound effects. I need more room on my soundboard and more research. Anyway, the new theory, according to the source, Fox Corporation Chair Rupert Murdoch removed Carlson over remarks Carlson made during a speech at the Heritage Foundation's 50th anniversary gala on Friday night. That would also explain the Friday night timing, I guess. Although that's, a quick reaction from Rupert Murdoch, who's not as spry as he used to be. Carlson laced his speech with religious overtones. Usually when you lace your speech, it's that's stuff like, bullshit. Right, exactly, saying things like that. Or where's the our other favorite Greg quote? There we are.
God, get the vaccine already, you fucks.
Now that's laced language, but this is Carlson has laced his speech with religious overtones. Here we go.
Thank you, God.
There we go. Religious overtones. Thank you, God. All right, throw that in there as well. These are the religious overtones that even Murdoch found too extreme. Like thank you, God, I guess. But anyway, the source apparently says, who was briefed on Murdoch's decision making, has laid this out for us. Okay, I lost the train of thought in that sentence. Stupid sound effects. Anyway, Carlson told the Heritage audience that national politics has become, oh boy, a Manichean battle between good and evil. That's binary. That's very binary. But there you have it. Carlson said that people advocating for transgender rights, and DEI programs, the diversity programs, right? Both, of course, want to destroy America. That's on everybody's agenda these days. And they could not be persuaded with facts. We should say that and stop engaging in these totally fraudulent debates. I've tried. That doesn't work, he said. The answer, Carlson suggested, was prayer. I have concluded it might be worth taking just 10 minutes out of your busy schedule to say a prayer for the future, and I hope you will, he said. Well, that stuff freaks Rupert out. He doesn't like all the spiritual talk, the source said. That's not even particularly, I don't know, that's not very heavy-handed about it, but it is a little bit ridiculous. I've always thought that was, you don't want to land on saying, you know what, no other sorts of remedies will work. I mean, you can add prayer, I guess, to the mix if you feel like it, but the idea that, well, none of that works. So if everybody just prays 10 minutes a day, like it's exercise, your God muscle will get larger if you pray 10 minutes a day, and then you'll be able to get these things done. But it's, like the rough equivalent of having prayer in schools. Ever since we took God out of schools, we've had all these problems. And if we just pray, da-da-da. Well, I noticed that, by the way, nobody has asked for prayer in schools instead of 2 armed guards. That one I have not heard yet. And I've always wondered, if it works that well, then there's probably a lot of cost savings to be achieved in public education. If you can just get everybody together and pray for, like, let's say, please God, give me all the knowledge it will take to pass the AP U.S. history exam. And then you can just do away with the salary of the teacher and all the books and take the test, and God will answer your prayers, and you'll get a 4 or a 5 on the AP exam and get college credits. Simple, easy, time saving, leaves lots of room for instruction in other subjects, although why bother? Basically, knowledge should be like the Matrix, right? And instead of asking the Matrix to plug in the cartridge that you need to learn Kung Fu, you just pray for it instead. It's not that much different. Anyway, and isn't it the same thing really at some certain level? I can't explain the entity that we're praying to. Maybe it's just the Matrix. All right. Well, anyway, Carlson declined to comment. A spokesperson for Fox Corporation declined to comment. So there you have it. That should be the end of the story. But no, we need more speculation. It's been reported that Fox Corporation CEO Lachlan Murdoch and Fox News CEO, that's 2 different CEOs. Fox Corp CEO is Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch. Fox News CEO is Suzanne Scott, and that they together made the decision to fire Carlson on Friday night. Another source, a person close to Murdoch, has said something similar to me, Gabriel Sherman. Gabriel's name I remembered, but not the last name. Gabriel Zephyr. So he's Sherman, Gabriel Zephyr. Anyway, so let's see. The other person said it was something like that as well. And Scott informed Carlson of the decision on Monday morning. So did they wait? Did they go to church to pray on it? I'm not sure. Anyway, Rupert Murdoch was perhaps unnerved by Carlson's I understand how to pronounce messianic, but messianism, I've never come across that form of messianic ism before, but okay, dang. Well, we'll deal with that one later. And we got some additional sourcing, I guess, on the religious freakout. Scott Anderson has sent me another one. We'll see whether it's similarly sourced. Rupert Murdoch was unnerved by this weird use of the form of messianism. Wow, I don't know. Because it echoed the end times worldview of Murdoch's ex-fiancée. Here we are. This is what Greg mentioned yesterday. And I had missed this aspect of the story. Ex-fiancée Anne Leslie Smith. I don't think I know about this ex-fiancée. I missed that one. And I haven't noticed anything since Wendy right? What was Wendy's last name before it was Murdoch? It was his last ex-wife, but this is just an ex-fiancée. He didn't end up making that mistake with her. And apparently she's into the same things, and he was ignoring it as long as possible and then decided not to marry her. Okay. In my May cover story, Gabriel's May cover story, I reported that Murdoch and Smith called off their 2-week engagement because Smith had told people Carlson was, quote, a messenger from God. Well, it's not that, it might not be the religiousness that bothers him so much as, well, thinking that about Tucker Carlson is just weird and dumb, and so I guess we shouldn't get married. Murdoch had seen Carlson and Smith discuss religion firsthand. In late March, Carlson had dinner at Murdoch's Bel Air vineyard with Murdoch and Smith, according to the source. During dinner, Smith pulled out a Bible and started reading passages from the book of Exodus, the source said. Oh, so they were having a Seder. So that's all that it was. When was that? Does it say when? Late March? No, I guess it wasn't Seder time just yet. But anyway, it would have been a funnier story. A few days later, after the dinner, Murdoch and Smith called off the wedding. There was an exodus, really, from the engagement is what happened here. By taking Carlson off the air, Murdoch was also taking away his ex's favorite show. Well, now that would really be a great explanation. Is it that religion freaks him out, or was he mad at his ex? And that's your favorite show, huh? Well, then screw you. I'm taking away your favorite show. That would really be something. Well, anyway, Smith did not respond to a request for comment, not even with a Bible quote. The 92-year-old mogul's broken engagement, and whatever else might be broken, is part of a string of erratic, not erotic, but erratic decisions that he has made of late that raises questions about Murdoch's leadership of his media empire. He's a bit of a Dianne Feinstein, I guess, in that sense. According to sources, executives at Fox are worried about Murdoch's unsteady hand at the wheel of the company. It's like the king is senile, because he is, but no one wants to say anything, the sources said. According to two sources, Fox settled with Dominion moments before the trial was set to begin. Was it really moments? Because Fox's lawyers didn't want Murdoch to testify in public. Ooh, another great fun angle. Okay, Scott's saying it sounds like the information that he sent along, which had a different publication platform, seems like the information is largely the same. And I thought that might be the case. So, okay, that'll save us a little bit of time. Thanks, Scott. Well, that's an interesting angle on it too. So they were hoping, and this is interesting, they were hoping and praying to settle for months, but they didn't want to pay up, the second source said. Once the trial began, the lawyers told Fox execs that Murdoch would be, quote, disgraced on the stand, run out of the boardroom, and his testimony will expose him as a lunatic sliding into senility. Wow. The person close to Murdoch disputed this. Rupert was very well prepared to testify, so, his friends are saying something completely different, whether realistically or not, but that really would have been something. I guess now we can all be even more disappointed in the effort or the acceptance of the settlement. It would have been interesting to see Rupert Murdoch destroyed as well. That's interesting, though. Maybe they settled because they knew they would all be fired if Rupert Murdoch saw them praying to settle. That's a realistic possibility as well. Lots of twists and turns. I don't think we've settled on things here. It's only made the issue more confused, but more fun, to be sure, because we got to talk about the possibility of Rupert Murdoch being completely out of his mind and being right about it as well. Okay, so let's see. Other things that we can share here. Here's a segue for us. We were talking about religion. Here's something that crossed the desk earlier, the virtual desk earlier this morning that ordinarily wouldn't get our notice necessarily, but let's go off into world affairs here. And, we'd spend plenty of time on Russia and Ukraine and the weirdness of Russia maybe kind of having a government, maybe not, etc. Is it mob influenced? Is it really just a mobocracy? Is it something different? Do we understand the nature of the Russian what passes for Russian government, or are we imposing our own structure here and saying, well, I don't know, I see who calls the shots there. And in Western culture, we call that the government, and we'll just leave it at that for now. Here's another angle on it from worldcrunch.com. I don't know exactly what that is. We could read a little bit about it. I don't know if I've ever read anything from there before. But this was an interesting perspective. I don't know if it validates our this platform of World Crunch or not, but we'll take it on an individual basis. Looks like maybe a foreign publication, because it notes here that we are in the English edition, and the writer here is Hubertus Lutterbach. So I don't know. Is it German? I'm not certain. Dateline is Berlin, so that's what's making me guess this. And get this. Here's the headline: Why Putin's public acts of religious piety, that's our transition, make him even more dangerous. Let's find out why. The subheader says geopolitical analysts who view Russia as an unpredictable force tend to understand Moscow's actions in purely worldly political terms. Like, what else would you analyze them in? Especially, of course, given, the legacy of the Soviet Union, which was, anti-religious, purged religion from the public sphere, generally speaking. And so it would have been unthinkable for all that time to think of their motivations as having been religious, since they were anti-religion. But of course, we're past the Soviet Union now. But there really hasn't been much indication that they were. We've seen the rise of the Russian Orthodox Church, or the return to the public sphere of the Russian Orthodox Church of late. We really haven't accounted for it, is this author's premise here, in the right way. So, German professor of theology, there's the answer, Hubertus Lutterbach, has uncovered a different message hidden in Putin's religiosity, an implicit threat to his neighbors and the world. And we're concerned about that because we're the world. Now, it is illustrated with a photo that will be described in the body of the text. I skimmed that much, of Vladimir Putin, as according to the caption here, taking part in baptismal bathing on Lake Seliger. I'm not certain how that's pronounced. And it's elaborate. It's described later on, and I'll get back to the description. But lacking in that description is the fact that he has left behind a pair of mid-calf height white rubber boots, not at all dissimilar from the ones worn to great effect, let's say, by Ron DeSantis in his visit to, was it Pine Island? I don't remember exactly where it was, in Florida, during one of the flooding episodes. And a lot of people have made a lot of hay about him and his stupid boots, and these look equally stupid. But they are on the deck here where Putin is taking his baptismal bath. So, on to what Hubertus Lutterbach has to say here. The recent image of Vladimir Putin, a different image, holding an Easter candle was seen around the world, as was the picture of him praying in front of an, iconostasis, maybe? The screen decorated with icons that separates the space around the altar from the main body of an Orthodox church. I'll tell you the rest of this story tomorrow on Eastern Orthodox Friday. Okay. And maybe a dangerous spot to be repeating the jokes about Eastern Orthodox churches. The pictures of Putin meeting Patriarch Kirill, I guess that's right, K-I-R-I-L-L, Kirill the First, the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, were also widely published. They show the two men embracing in a traditional gesture of sharing the peace and speaking together, as well as Putin presenting Kirill with a bouquet of flowers. In the photographs, the Russian president is wearing a blue suit and a tie or blue coat, when the Russian patriarch is dressed in his bishop's vestments and crown. And I saw the picture later on. It's a very ornate crown, very interesting to look at. Putin's show of Christian piety and his close links to the Orthodox Church raise the question, what role does religion play in the Russian president's view of himself as a ruler? It's a good question. And, of course, now we're bumping into the next break. So we'll set up the story and then jump out for 2 minutes and come back with the rest. Putin's religious basis for wielding power. Is clearly conveyed in a picture that did the rounds of both print and digital media a few months ago. And I guess we missed it. Until now, it has not, Hubertus argues, been analyzed from a religious and political angle. That is a glaring oversight, as the picture clearly expresses important aspects of how Putin sees his role as leader. I can see how that would be overlooked. That here in the United States, for instance, we're used to these sorts of empty gestures all the time. Is it just a Western-style empty gesture, or what? And why would he do anything Western-style at all, really? Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Ed Roots Radio. Let's continue on with this World Crunch article about Putin's public displays of religiosity and what it might actually mean. Like I said, here in the United States and across much of the West, we've kind of gotten used to this idea of these hollow shows of religiosity. Sometimes genuine, I suppose, but we're also used to the hollow ones. As just part of the gesture that people make to make a nod toward conservatism, whether they personally believe in it or not, whether that's the religion or conservatism. But, you might wonder why, what interest does Putin have in a westernizing gesture like that, if any? Or is something else happening here? So I guess that opens the door for that question. What role does religion play in the Russian president's view of himself as a ruler? Putin's religious basis for wielding power is, of course, we did say this already, clearly conveyed in this picture that did the rounds both in print and digital a few months ago, but it hasn't been properly analyzed, he argues. The picture, which dates from 2018, that's the one that illustrated this article that we were talking about. So his use of the white rubber boots predates the Ron DeSantis photo. So how do you like that? Now you can accuse DeSantis of copying Putin and all of this. It shows the Russian president in 2018 taking part in a so-called ice baptism, the ritual performed by Orthodox Christians on January 19th to commemorate Jesus' baptism. I think the temperature was slightly warmer in the Middle East probably than it is in Russia on January 19th. So what's going on here? A hole in the shape of a cross is carved out of a thick layer of ice on the surface of a lake. In this case, what was it? Lake Seliger? Anyway, so they cut out a hole in the shape of a cross, symbolic, obviously. Worshippers strip down to their swim shorts or bathing suit and climb down an improvised ladder into the water. It doesn't look that improvised, but, it's constructed out of 2x4s. And the decking looks very nice and very well put together. And nothing Vladimir Putin likes more than stripping down to shorts. He loves being shirtless, as you know. And so he was only too glad to participate in this. So what do? You head down the improvised ladder into the water, then plunge briefly under the surface. This is a way of remembering and renewing their baptism. Usually there is an Orthodox priest present who offers a sign of blessing. In Putin's case, the ritual took place at night. That is interesting. In the background, there are 5 Orthodox priests dressed in black, holding precious gold-plated icons mounted on wooden sticks, including images of Mary holding the baby Jesus and Jesus on the cross. The icons are a symbol showing that they believe the saints depicted here, including Jesus himself, to be truly present. I mean, I guess that's just generally, that's what religion is and what the icons are all about. And I don't know if it's specific to the baptism setting, but I don't think so. In the picture, Putin is lit up in the foreground, shirtless, of course, already immersed up to his hips and in the cross-shaped hole in the ice. Around his neck, he is wearing a long gold chain with a gold cross that hangs down over his chest. None of the priests in the photograph, one maybe even a bishop, is wearing a cross necklace. Only Putin. That's an interesting point there, too. Yeah, they're all clad in black and holding the icons, and they're bearded, but that's all the only indication they give that they actually are Russian Orthodox priests. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they just have beards. I mean, I guess, I don't think that's what they mean to imply. There's a different interpretation given. But I mean, I guess if you're staging such a thing, maybe they're all just, state security officers, rather than actual Russian Orthodox priests. But anyway, here's the rest of the interpretation. So none of the rest of them is wearing a cross necklace, which you would ordinarily expect them to be wearing, I guess, if they were, in fact, priests. Now, in this way, our writer says, the picture portrays Putin as the one who, like Christ, has power over the world. That's in a bit of dispute, let's say, including over the religious sphere. But that's an interesting interpretation. Why none of the rest of them wear the symbol of Christian authority around their neck and only Putin does? I don't know if they gave it that much thought, or maybe they're not really priests, or I don't know what. But anyway, if we were to add a speech bubble to this scene, the most fitting words might be the ones from the mouth of God himself. You are my beloved son, or you are my chosen one. The first quote is the words God is recorded, as speaking to Jesus at his baptism, according to Matthew chapter 3, verse 17, and the second at his transfiguration, Luke chapter 9, verse 35. It is no coincidence that the iconography of Putin as ruler draws on the age-old motif of the high king and high priest, the priest-king. An interesting idea. This is the oldest conception of rulership that exists in the history of religion and culture. It means that the ruler is chosen by God to reign over a certain territory as a priest-king, and that no one can depose him. Well, that might be something he would actually be interested in. The Russian president uses religion and its representatives for his own ends. In Putin's Russia, bishops and patriarchs function as his religious and liturgical henchmen. If they want to stay in power, they have no other choice than to submit to the rule of the high king and high priest and provide him with a ritual framework for the exercise of his power, as we can see from the example of Patriarch Kirill of Moscow. There is a religious sentiment underpinning the words of Russian author Viktor Yerofeyev when he writes of the continuation of Putin's Tsarist rule. He argues that its religious basis goes beyond the Russian Orthodox Church. The Kremlin's official view is that Russia is defending its traditional values. Yerofiev wrote in the we're into German here, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Oh, goodness. Unlike the West, and again, that's unlike the West, it has access to secrets about the meaning of life, which makes its population into a chosen people of God. God dwells in the people. I mean, every culture has its version of that, and I guess it should be no surprise that the Russians have their own as well. Renowned Russian cultural historian Mikhail Shishkin traces the origins of this way of thinking back to the year 988. That's a long way back, when Prince Vladimir of Kiev, by the way, who died in 1015 and is venerated as a saint today, was baptized and established Christianity as the official religion of the territories of the so-called Rus, which covers large parts of modern-day Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Putin is now seeking to draw a continuous line. I mean, we've heard this with reference to a continuous line of the history and tracing it back to the Kiev Rus and even Viking roots of the settlement, and oh my gosh, Anyway, lots of interest in the historical lineage, but now also the religious lineage. So Putin is now seeking to draw a continuous line between the present day and these events of the 10th and 11th centuries, and even to the point of saying that this is part of the reason why behind his invasion of Ukraine, to recapture Kiev as one of the hearts not of Ukrainian culture, but of the greater, Russian Rus society, and it was the original capital of the Rus, of the Rusland, I guess, as the Germans might have called it, or the Vikings may have referred to it that way as well. I don't know, but then it sort of migrated eastward as people migrated eastward to populate the rest, the balance of Europe to the east, and settling Moscow centuries later. Anyway, so Putin now seeking to draw a continuous line between the present day and these events of the 10th and 11th centuries, which have taken on an almost mythical status. Shishkin explains Putin's understanding of himself as a priest king as if he were looking at the picture of the ice baptism on the frozen lake. The majority of the Russian population is still living in the past. They identify strongly with their tribe, Greg reminds us that everybody does, and are entirely dependent on the pack leader, the boss, the Khan, or the Tsar. Shishkin writes in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which I still don't know what it is, but it's the second time he's made me pronounce that. Most Russians are still living in an age when their tribe is always right, and over many generations the state has filled their minds with Ruski Mir, the Ruski Mir worldview, that the Holy Fatherland is an island surrounded by an ocean of enemies, and only the Tsar in the Kremlin can save this land and its people, that only his iron fist can maintain order in Russia. Sounds familiar, but it sounds familiar from regimes around the world also. Given this view, is it any wonder that the former Russian Minister of Culture, another name I have to try to pronounce, Vladimir Medinsky, oh, that's not so bad, claimed in all seriousness that Russians had, quote, an extra chromosome? Is it, given this worldview, any wonder that he should do so? Yes, because that's not what I think of when you say that someone has an extra chromosome, but okay. He wanted to imply, it is said here, that the Russian people, ruled over by their priest king, Putin, are the best in the world, really the only true people who are genetically superior to the rest of humanity. At the same time, they infer from this supposed biological distinction, not terribly removed from Nazism, really, that they have a right to rule over all other people, who they dismiss as half-human or subhuman. Uh-oh, that is dangerous, isn't it? With this in mind, The picture of Putin undergoing the ice baptism shows that he is claiming the right to rule over all people. He is elevating himself in order to assert his right to rule as a priest king through deadly wars of aggression. This may be slightly overinterpreting things, but it's an interesting idea anyway. Now comes the picture of Putin speaking with the patriarch in his very ornate and interesting looking crown as well. So, okay, this is interesting. Now, the West was not prepared is the next section here. I've been neglecting the section names, but in this case, I think it introduces things well. At its heart, Putin's worldview and religious outlook are shaped by the words of philosopher Ivan Ilyin, who lived from 1883 to 1954, who claimed that the world was so corrupt that it needed to be saved by a holy nation, namely spiritually pure Russia. That's some line to be taking. I guess in the early days, that was probably a more manageable line to take. But by 1954, I don't know whether that would have gone over all that well with official Soviet policy. But anyway, within Russia, Ilyin understood the relationship between the people and their ruler to be of a mystical, religious nature, with both a worldly and a spiritual element. A year ago, who could have imagined that in the 21st century, the leader of a G8 country, if we consider Russia to be one, would dare to threaten the peace that was so hard won after the ravages of the Second World War and the Cold War, all for the sake of an age-old concept of rulership? The West believed it was unthinkable that President Putin would withdraw from this political alliance of Western industrialized countries, and therefore it was not prepared. If those in the West had had a clearer understanding of the religious ideologies at play, could always benefit from that, then they may have been able to predict the Russian president's behavior more accurately. In any case, against this background, it is vital that from now on, we consider the role played by religion in shaping international politics. And I mean, that does seem weird and out of place in the 21st century, as they say, but it is also the case that religion has shaped politics for, the entirety of the balance of the rest of human history prior to the modern era. And so why it wouldn't continue at some level now, that I couldn't explain to you. So it's a good point, and another reminder that we just really, that we just don't have a firm concept. We don't seem to understand exactly what's going on there. And Putin and the Russian people probably view governance and rulership very differently than we do, both culturally and through necessity. But we should be well aware of that and stop trying to fit that square peg into the round hole of the Western concept of all of these things. All right, let's see. Other things that we have to get to. There's at least one or two other things I thought it might be worth sharing with you, and I'm trying to decide whether, maybe what we'll do is I'll make mention of this other piece that I've had in pocket for about a week now, just because it would have made a good transition with that sort of religious overtone to this. But now I think I'll just mention it to you in favor of bringing you Rosalyn MacGregor's recorded bit that probably should have come earlier when we were making the rounds of the states. But before we run out of time, first, though, I'll tell you about this from the Washington Post. April 21st, Isaac Arnsdorf and Jeff Stein wrote this piece after, I guess, another of Trump's, speeches somewhere that we probably didn't talk a great deal about at the time. The Trump touts authoritarian vision for second term, which we always knew he was going to do, but the pull quote here, "I am your justice." You may have heard this discussed elsewhere, just in terms of the, sweeping authoritarian rhetoric. But I wonder whether it makes any sense to consider it with the religious overtones now that we've just heard about what might be happening in Putin's head here. The former president is proposing deploying the military domestically. You're not supposed to be able to do that, but would he do it anyway? Sure, why not? Purging the federal workforce. Same thing, not supposed to do that. Do it anyway? Maybe. And building futuristic cities from scratch. That seems awfully weird and maybe a little weirdly religious as well. And I'm not sure which religion we're talking about because you find out in skimming the article that this is Jared Kushner's idea. And of course, he claims to be an Orthodox Jew. So who knows? Anyway, give you a sense of what's going on without reading the entirety of the thing here. Mandatory stop and frisk. How mandatory under what circumstances? I don't know. Deploying the military to fight street crime, break up gangs, and deport immigrants. Purging the federal workforce and charging leakers, except the one that leaked the information that they like right now. Former President Donald Trump has steadily begun outlining his vision for a second-term agenda. They should press him on the leaker thing. Focusing on unfinished business from his time in the White House and an expansive vision for how he would wield federal power. In online videos and stump speeches, Trump is pledging to pick up where his first term left off and push even further. Where he earlier changed border policies to reduce refugees and people seeking asylum, he's now promising to conduct an unprecedented deportation operation. Where he previously moved to make it easier to fire federal workers, he's now proposing a new civil service exam. After urging state and local officials to take harsher measures on crime and homelessness, Trump said he is now determined to take more direct federal action. In 2016, I declared, "I am your voice," Trump said in a speech last month at the CPAC conference, and repeated at his first 2024 campaign rally in Waco, Texas a few weeks later. "Today I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution." Very messianic, very religious in its overtones. But it hasn't been analyzed that way, I don't think, although perhaps Jeff Sharlet may have done some analysis that way. Trump's emerging platform, or perhaps Peter Manso may have done it as well. Trump's emerging platform marks a sharp departure from traditional conservative orthodoxy, emphasizing small government, which was famously summed up, of course, in Ronald Reagan, jerk that he is, first inaugural address: "Government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem." Okay. Trump, by contrast, is proposing to apply government power centralized under his authority toward a vast range of issues that have long remained outside the scope of federal control. Here, I'll just remind you of my own framework of interpretation of Trump and Trumpism and where it fits in with the Republican Party. Whereas Reagan preached, that government can't solve the problems. Government is the problem. That government can't help was his, great innovation that ruined America. But, that was his great innovation. Government can't help people. That's just not what it's about. It's not cut out for that. Trump takes that one step further. Trump convinced Republicans that government not only can't help, but that what it should be doing is hurting people. It's one thing to say, well, okay, Democrats say government can help. Republicans say, no, government can't help. We need to get government out of the way. Trump reverses course here and says, it's not that we need to get government out of the way. It's that we need to do a 180. We need to use government to hurt the right kind of people we don't like. Let's hurt them with it. And then the people who we aren't hurting will cheer. And then the leopard will then eat their face later on, but that's neither here nor there. It's one thing to say a debate between government can help, no, government can't help. But the fact that we're now, locked into the necessity of debate because we're binary about these things and they're both equal because binary things are equal, even though that's not actually necessarily true and never has been anywhere in nature, but okay. Now we are locked into debate with, no, we should hurt people with government. I think most people would find that a foreign concept if they stopped to think about it. But if the people stopped and thought, we wouldn't be where we are today. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. You should read the rest of it. As I mentioned, there is discussion in here of Right. This idea of building like new cities from scratch, from the ground up, which is, they do actually mention, yeah, that's not actually how cities work, just historically. That doesn't work out very well. And there have been places that have tried that in the past. It's a weird, autocratic, messianic kind of thing, but it doesn't work because inorganically grown cities collapse under their own weight, et cetera, et cetera. But it is mentioned here that for some reason that is a Jared Kushner product. And I'm not certain why he pushes it. Okay, before we run out of time, and we're getting close to that, let me roll out another Michigan report from Rosalyn MacGregor, who brings in a common theme here with something that Greg often brings up, the youth vote, but specifically the Michigan youth vote.
Good morning, David. I come with good news in today's installment from the great state of Michigan.
Yeah, good news.
This segment is about how Michigan led the country in young voters who turned out in the midterm elections. MLive writes, quote, "The kids are all right, at least when it comes to Democratic participation. Young voters in Michigan turned out in the midterms more than in any other state, according to a new report from researchers at Tufts University in Massachusetts. In Michigan, 36.5% of voting eligible residents aged 18 to 29 cast ballots in the November 2022 election, beating the other 38 states for which data is available. The national youth average participation rate was 23%. Michigan also was one of 4 states where young voter turnout was higher in 2024 than in the previous midterm election 2018. The state gained 3.8 percentage points, surpassed only by New York's 4.3-point gain. Maine came in second in youth turnout last year at 35.8%, and 2 states, Minnesota and Oregon, tied for third at 35.5%. Tennessee had the lowest youth turnout, 12.7% of eligible voters. The Tufts report, released earlier this month, does not list a margin of error. Abortion was a major motivating issue for young voters per the report, especially in Michigan, where Proposal 3 enshrined reproductive rights into the state constitution. The issue also helped Democrats gain a majority in the legislature and retain the governor's office. Michigan's accessible voting registration was also highlighted in the report, including its online same-day and automatic registration laws. Quote, "A strong democracy requires informed and engaged citizens," unquote, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said in a statement. And, quote, "Michigan is leading the way in ensuring our youngest voters are active participants in determining our future." She credited partnerships with colleges and their local clerks with helping students cast ballots conveniently. The University of Michigan, for example, had a robust early voting site at the campus's art museum. Benson's administration also partnered with Michigan high schools in a program called My Vote Matters to encourage 17 and 18-year-olds to register to vote, unquote. So that's some good news for the upcoming election in 2024. Voters aged 18 to 29 showed up in 2022 and helped give Michigan Democrats an unexpected trifecta of political leadership. Way to go, team! Let's keep the effort and momentum going into 2024. That's my segment for today. Remember to give Kagro in the Morning Show your support, whether that's with a donation or with a like or by sharing your thoughts. If you have suggestions, you can find me on Spoutable. Rosalyn MacGregor over and out. Back to you, David.
All right. Thanks, Rosalyn. And yeah, we did get that in just under the wire. With the minute or so that we've got left before we start playing our music and getting the hell out of here for the weekend, I thought I would at least go back to that Washington Post article. I wasn't sure whether if I took the time to do that, we would be able to fit in Rosalyn's segment. So those, cities from scratch, freedom cities, apparently is the way they're referring to it. And the section in the Washington Post article about that does in fact mention Kushner. The new cities proposal consists of a national contest to charter up to 10 DC-sized metropolises on undeveloped federal land. Not a great idea. Administration officials discussed the concept toward the end of Trump's term, but they discussed a lot of dumb things during Trump's term. But he did not campaign on it in 2020. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who just happens to be a developer, and, maybe he'd benefit from this, who knows, pushed the idea in White House meetings after it was initially brought up by Haley, who was it? Not Nikki Haley, but a different Haley mentioned up above. We skipped over that part, so sorry about that. And another speechwriter on Miller's team, Ross Worthington, who is now on the 2024 campaign, according to a person familiar with the matter. See, there's that again. Who spoke on condition of anonymity. You know all about that. Trump has discussed the new freedom cities in utopian terms, one might even say messianic terms, with flying cars. Of course, sure, why not? Manufacturing hubs and opportunities for home ownership. Hey, how about that? Promising a quantum leap in the American standard of living. Flying cars, everybody. The campaign has provided few details on how the plan would work in practice. Trump acknowledged that the idea needed more work over a Sunday dinner in mid-March, according to economic advisor Stephen Moore. Okay. He said, I'm still trying to figure out how it's going to work. Something like that, Moore recalled in an interview. He said, how do you think we should make that work? And I'm going to help him with the idea. That's just incredibly... I'd be like, don't include that in the profile, please. That's obviously stupid, and just leave that out entirely. The guy's about to run for president. How would that even? I don't know, but I'm going to endorse that. 10 cities built from scratch and federal land. No conflict of interest there. They won't understand that somehow as a conflict of interest among Republicans in Nebraska. Okay. Anyway. Time to sign off for the weekend. Time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It is back with a Friday show. Let's use the time to tell you what's coming up, starting off in the Bistro Cafe. Congress has a responsibility, that's the term they use, to investigate the Supreme Court over ethics concerns. Oh well, womp womp. Then, on the rest of the menu, East Brunswick, New Jersey cops found large capacity ammunition magazines at the home of a Republican candidate. Oh no. Who threatened to, quote, light up his rivals. Great. A Missouri judge temporarily halted enforcement of a first-of-its-kind rule that restricts access to gender-affirming health care just hours before it was set to take effect. And the Minneapolis NAACP sued the city of Minneapolis over allegations that police officers used phony social media accounts to spy on its leaders and members.
In the morning with David Waldman.
All right, time also for work from around the country and around the world as well. How about this? Germany has stepped up surveillance of far-right party affiliates, and a federal judge in Brazil ordered a temporary suspension of Telegram, citing the social media's platform's failure to provide all information federal police requested. Wow. Happens everywhere. We'll see you next week.